This is our second of 2 community meetings, kind of open house for discussion of the proposed Willow and Yucca Street LID, Local Improvement District. For those who are here, we have some maps and a spreadsheet for you to look at. For those at home, I can share those as we get along. I will share the documents that we're referring to. But just to bring everyone up to speed, this will be repetitious for some folks. An LID is a way of paying for improvements in the neighborhood, usually some kind of infrastructure like water, sewer, streets. And typically these improvements are things that, in the way we do things now, the original development would pay for them and then would dedicate those main water lines and streets over to the city to maintain. In cases like this neighborhood, it got annexed into the city after it was already, after there were already homes in the area. And so some of those improvements either, well, basically weren't put in at all in the first place. And so an LID is a way of correcting that, making it possible for the neighborhood to get those improvements. And you know, the cost of that is assessed in some way on the properties who are part of that district, so that you know, tax money from or funding from the whole city isn't paying for one neighborhood, because some folks don't care for that. They think the funding should benefit, city funding should benefit everyone in the city. There's differing people, reasonable minds can differ on that, but this is kind of the system we have. So how this works is we started with coming up with, well, there was a petition to form this local improvement district, saying, you know, there were a majority of residents in that area wanted water and improved streets. And so the city started looking into that and started putting together cost estimates of what this would cost. And then we take those cost estimates and we divide them among the properties based on a formula where you take each property is kind of assessed based on their street frontage, but also on the overall property size. And then those are averaged and you get to kind of a mixture of the two. And on top of that, you have to also think of, okay, what is the city going to contribute to that? And initially, when we initially put out this information back in February, I believe there wasn't actually any city funding that we included in the numbers. Since then, it seems that really to make this work, that might be something that will be necessary, and so staff are kind of recommending to the council that the city put some funding into it. The other addition to that is that there's a large number of properties that are all owned by one particular person, one particular organization, and they are very much wanting this to happen, and so they have basically said that they would forego any city assistance and allow that city money to be divided up only among all the other properties. And so that's why on this sheet you see a column that says city partnership, and it's got a number, and there's a bunch of blank spaces where some properties aren't getting that. And that's because they volunteered to forego that money. So that makes it so that those property owners, you know, get the benefit, get a lowered cost, and this other property owner would shoulder a larger burden. Now, I can't comment on what homes he's putting in. I can just say that we have rules on what kind of home what kind of manufactured home you put in. Right. There is a number of properties that same gentleman owns, and the city will uphold the. Yeah. Well, we do have we have regulations on what can be placed and what can be built, and we will do our best to make sure that that's followed, and also enforce our code to make sure that places aren't an eyesore. But we do have limits on our on our ability to enforce those things, but we do it to the best of our ability. So the great thing about that, though, is that it does lower the cost for other people in the area. And so this spreadsheet is kind of the numbers that we have currently. This assumes that the city would contribute about 28% of the cost for those properties that received city assistance, and divides it all up. So I guess at this stage, we don't also have the maps up for you to look at. What I'd like to do basically is answer questions and help people understand how we got to where we are, and talk about what this means for the future. Yeah. So I can go into that a little bit. Can I ask which property you own? Which one? Oh, okay. So that's the riverfront property, right? Okay. So one of the things that we did, there's a couple of modifications, and these are important to explain because they affect your property in particular. First, with the way that we developed all the costs and estimated what it would cost, there are some areas, because of the width of the street and because of our efforts to try to rein in costs, there are some properties that would not have a sidewalk directly in front. They would be served by the sidewalk across the street. And well, right, but what we tried to work into the formula is basically to think that, well, having a sidewalk across the street is not worth quite as much as having a sidewalk right in front of your house. And so there is a lower amount that is assessed because of that. So that's kind of a discount to those properties, and your property would be one of those where that would be taken into account. The other problem that we have with the large properties is how do we, because of the large amount of square footage, with the way the formula works, those properties have a high price tag. And the problem is that if we say, okay, we will treat them just as if they're one of the smaller properties, well, then those large property owners have a better deal because they can later partition off part of their property, and they haven't paid into the system for that extra house that would be benefiting from that neighborhood. So the idea being that we tried to identify those large properties and see, okay, if the property owner wanted to maximize their value and develop their property, what would that look like? And we're not saying that you want to or that you're going to. Right, but we're trying to look down the road to the future of, say somebody else buys this property later in the future and decides, hey, there's enough room here, I can put another house or two or so on this property and benefit from it that way. We're trying to think to those later things, and because that's typically, I mean, we're trying to think beyond people's lifetimes.
I understand what you're saying,
right.
but like on the other hand, we're paying for them to develop it later. That's kind of free to us. And we used to have our own well, which works great, and we have our own septic system, which works great.
Right.
It's really hard for us to say, let's put 80,000 into this thing when we're not going to use it.
Joe, can you turn on your mic?
That's the problem for us.
And point it that direction. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we want to try to take some of those things into account. So one of the things that we've tried to do is say, okay, we understand that people right now may not want to subdivide their property. How about right now, they pay for the one home's value of these improvements, and then the rest of the cost could be deferred until either it's subdivided or it's 20 years down the road. Was kind of the arrangement that we've tried to work out here. And just a caveat, right? A caveat: none of these things are set in stone. These are just ideas that we've had as staff of a way of trying to make this work.
Yeah.
And so with your property,
I understand you guys are under a lot of pressure too, but
right. Well, so with your property in particular, the way that would work is after the city. After the city money is applied to your property, if the council approves this 28%, business, which again that's not up to me.
Right.
But after that, you'd be looking at 79.5, the total cost assessed to your property. What we're saying is we're saying if we look at your property and trying to, if somebody were to buy it with an eye for developing with the current rules, you basically could fit four more houses on that property.
Yeah,
Each with what, Joe, what was the square footage of the lot that you worked out? Like an 8,000 square foot lot?
Yeah, a little under that, 7,500.
Little under it. So the minimum lot size for this zone is 5,000 square feet. And so we didn't say, okay, let's cram them in there. We wanted to do something reasonable, and we felt that was a reasonable amount. So what we're saying is, initially, you would pay the lower amount just for the one house, which would be 15. On this calculation, it's 15.9, and then the remaining cost, this 63.6, would be deferred. And the only time that would be triggered it would be either 20 years down the road, or it would be when the property is subdivided. At which point there would be a house that would help pay for those improvements.
Okay, if it's triggered 20 years down the road and we're like in our 70s, how are we going to pay for that 20 years down the road?
And that's an excellent question.
That's another question, because we'll both be retired by then, and
right.
There's another problem.
Right.
Not a lot of money in the forecast.
Right. No, I completely agree. So the way typically it works, and with these, we do have a provision in our code with local improvement districts that if the property owner is of a certain age, you can basically defer it until their estate takes the property, right? And so at that point, say it's 20 years down the road, you haven't subdivided, you're still alive, you're not in a position to pay it. Again, I'm not entirely sure on how this would work, but the way we could work it out, and right now is the time to work it out, it would basically go on the property. It would go as a lien on the property. For your lifetime, you wouldn't have to pay on that lien, but then when you leave that property to your heirs, or there's a transfer of title, then it would be paid out of that transfer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. We're kind of dealing with the same thing with my dad, actually.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So that's the best idea we've come up with. But the purpose of these meetings is not only to explain what our thought process is, but it's also to gain feedback.
Well, that sounds better to me, but yeah, because the other part was like almost half of what we paid for the house, and we were like, how the heck are we going to do that, right?
Right.
Especially when we're not utilizing the services. It's just with a wrinkle.
Yeah, right. We were like, how are we going to do that?
Yes, and if I were in your position, I'd be just as concerned.
Yeah, we've been sweating it for weeks now.
Well, I apologize for any distress that you felt. Our intent behind this is not to freak people out, but to really generate the conversation.
Right.
Our problem is that as soon as we ask the question, it tends to get people freaked out.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so the way things are standing, if it went according to the way we're hoping, and it's 15.9, is that like the 20-year thing or 12-year?
Yeah.
What is
so. This would be funded through, most likely through a bond, where the city would be basically taking on this debt. And we would shop it out. This calculation assumes that we could get like a 3.5. It would likely be lower than that for a annual percentage rate.
Right.
And so the city would take on this bond, and then depending on how the bond is structured with the payments, most of the time, these types of bonds are annual or semi-annual payments. Here on this sheet, we're assuming a monthly payment, but that was mainly because we want people to understand on a monthly basis what this would mean for them, and that because most people have monthly expenses, not semi-annual or annual expenses like cities do. So the city essentially would be the bondholder and be making the payments, and then we would be assessing all of the properties based on their share. And so we would be billing you for your share of this calculation. But the city would.
Fair than, yeah.
But that way we get, that way it's the whole neighborhood gets the benefit of the economies of scale that you get with all of it being done at the same time, and then also the city's credit rating, which would help with the interest rate and things
Yeah.
like that.
And I know there's a lot of people down there that need it, and there's a lot of people that don't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That was my concern, and since we don't really need it, I mean, I know other people still do, and so I didn't want to take it away from them, but it's like, just the payment with that 111,000 just like bowled us over. We're like,
Uh-huh.
how the heck?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so that does answer some questions, and that's almost reasonable, I think.
Just a question, if there was a development, instead of the 15, it was 63,
Mm-hmm.
would that be, like you said, per unit or just overall?
So that actually is overall. So this is assuming. So we're assuming that there could be 4 more houses fit onto your property.
Really, but okay.
and that's certainly reasonable minds can differ.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. So what we did was we basically, that would be a total of 5 homes, including the one that's there. So we took the total amount, the 79.5, and just divided that by 5. And so the 1/5 is that 15.9, and the 4/5 is the 63.6.
See, we liked it there because there was nothing else there. And now they're putting the mobile homes in, and we're just kind of like, oh man.
Yeah.
Now can we build a fence?
And the only thing I can say is that I wish more people would look into cities' comprehensive plans and zoning plans and other property lines and
Yeah.
think of what's the worst case scenario of what could develop around you.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't expected exactly.
I don't know if you guys are the people to ask this to, but, so we looked into getting a fence.
Okay.
And they said, I would like to have gotten a 6-foot privacy fence because it's literally horrid to look across the street right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told that I'd have to ask for a variance, that which I believe equaled $600. And I was just curious, well, why?
So what? So a variance is essentially because staff can approve things that are in the code, right? We have rules that we're given of what we can approve, and then there are certain things that go beyond what staff is allowed, and that's the planning commission or the city council. Anytime a question has to be put before the planning commission or the city council, there's a public meeting. There's the notice that has to be mailed out to all the properties. There's basically a significant amount of work that goes around that process, and so that's essentially where that fee comes from.
We were
Is to
basically
get
just
that
wondering,
going.
because we've seen a lot of 6-foot fences,
Yeah.
and we're like, wait a second here.
So now and certainly some fences were built before we had the rules,
Right.
and then other fences get built somehow without our knowledge, and we do our best to find those. In your case, one thing I would look at is because it's such a large property, we have rules. The rules that we have for fences are usually based on the proximity to the property line. So if you're right up against a street, that fence is 3.5 feet usually, I believe.
Or
And-
not.
Well, is the limit.
Maybe it is.
That's the limit. And then when you get further back, you can go up to 6 feet. I mean, I have a 6-foot privacy fence in my yard.
How far back do you have to be for?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
I don't recall the exact amount, but it's as you get further back, you can go higher.
Okay,
So-
we didn't even think about that part.
Yeah, it's usually around the building setback. So in that zone, I think the building setback is 15 feet, or is it 20? It's 20 feet. So once you get 20 feet back, you should be able to put up that 6-foot fence.
Okay.
That's why you see in some neighborhoods, that's why you see a fence where it's shorter in the front, and then on their side yard, you'll see an angled fence
Yeah, we've noticed
that'll go
that.
up.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
essentially what they're doing, is that's gotten back to the setback so that they can have it
Gotcha.
at a higher
Okay.
point.
You know, it's
Thank you for answering
understandable
that.
too. I mean, I guess the reason I was a little flummoxed was that, we have no corners. Ours is just a 500 feet. It's going to cost me a minute.
Right now,
to put
yeah.
a fence in.
Yeah.
Already. So then, throw another 600 on top of that and going, oh golly, dang. I can't get 20 feet off of, 20 feet off of the center of the road?
No, 20 feet from your property line. So the road right of way, you take that property line where it borders the road, and then 20 feet back from that is where you could have it be 6 feet.
Well, that makes it so that there's considerably less because there's a tremendous drop off, 7 feet off of the road. I don't know where my property line actually is on that.
Yeah,
Kind of hard to tell sometimes.
it can be.
Yeah.
And
Our property is such a weird shape too. It takes over part of the river and across. And
yeah, I noticed that you have a little triangle on the other side of the river that's, I guess it's unbuildable, but I guess you could put a dock over there if you wanted.
have to float across to sit over there and go fishing. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
you could
kinda
build a
funny.
bridge.
We've never used it. Everybody else does, but it's
Yeah.
kind of funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You actually have like a little beach over there, it looks like.
Yeah, there is a little beach when the river is down lower. Yeah,
Yeah,
little
yeah.
gravel beach.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Because it's really hard to get down on the river on our side, really, because it's really steep.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a really interesting shaped property.
Yeah, that's great.
I'd like to be able to look at the references. Yeah, the first reason that got me interested, besides seeing all the double lights come in, was all of a sudden kids are running down my grass slope with their bicycles and seeing how good they can skid across the yard.
And we're scared they're going to fall in the river, for one thing,
Well,
of our property.
one
Yeah,
afternoon we came home and there's juveniles,
2 and 4 years old.
and they're standing on the literal cliff next to the river. No supervision. And I'm
Sure
thinking,
does.
holy crap.
Scary.
Did we leave a cell phone?
That's mine. I was recording.
Oh,
Yeah, so, yeah,
Anyway, that's another reason we want a fence.
Yeah.
So,
I've got to get a fence. I prefer not to see the stuff going across the road. But
it's also a safety fence.
well, good fences make good neighbors, right?
Yeah, actually. So thank you for your answers on those
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
That helped a lot.
Yeah, and any other questions that come up, we really want to do our best to meet people's needs,
Appreciate that.
because it's not an easy thing. And our hope really with a lot of these improvements, our hope is to improve the overall neighborhood. And you find that neighborhoods where you do have a street constructed, where you do have reliable water service, they tend to go up in value. Increases in value tend to bring changes in ownership, more owner-occupied houses, and usually a little bit more pride taken in the condition of the house.
We've actually been trying to improve that neighborhood since we've been there.
Right.
But it's been tough. Let me tell you what, there are some,
has there been a major change in the year of a double wide that you can get
So,
a loan for?
The city,
Thing?
yeah, so the city doesn't have I mean, I think it's like 1976 or something. You can go back far.
Oh, really?
But the thing is that's not actually the controlling thing when it comes to manufactured homes. In the city, you can't, unless you're in a manufactured home park, which that is not a manufactured home park, you cannot put a single wide on a property. It has to be at least double wide. It can't have a sheet metal siding or sheet metal roof. And the age is not what's looked at so much as whether it meets current building code or not. And so typically if you get old enough, the homes are not, they don't meet the current code. And
we've
so
got a couple of them that have been in half when you were moving them. That's
pretty
old,
and we
but-
actually have we're going through a process of updating our development code,
Yeah.
and there are more stringent requirements that we're placing on manufactured homes in that code. But because that's taking a while, at actually Monday's planning commission meeting, they're going to hear a proposal to change our code to make it more stricter now. So that we're hopeful that if they agree and they recommend that in the next couple months, those requirements will be made a bit more strict.
Yeah, we had somebody come and inspect our new heating cooling unit in our house the
Mhm.
other day, and he looked at it and went, "Is that a trailer park?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I have to look into that. That looks really bad." And I'm like, "Wow, if you guys think it looks bad and I think it looks bad, it must look pretty bad." I don't know.
Yeah.
When we were first looking into buying, I couldn't get a loan on a property that had a double wide on it unless it was new, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's why I was curious, because unless they really got the laws changed on that, I don't see that being anything more than a rental line.
Yeah.
Just by proxy.
And that's typically the case. It's not unusual to find major financing problems when it comes to putting a manufactured home in. Yeah.
Hopefully, get a bunch of really nice old people that need
That's what we're hoping for.
affordable housing instead of some of the other
Yeah.
stuff on that.
But yeah, but the more improvement you can put into a neighborhood with the infrastructure, the more you tend to see things go that
makes
way.
sense.
And it's one of those things where, yes, it's expensive to have all these improvements, but even if you don't use the improvements, it does have a way of lifting the neighborhood, and that's what we really hope to have happen here.
Okay. See that.
Any other questions from
I
you
have just
two?
an off-the-wall question.
Sure.
Do you happen to know how much it costs to hook up the city if that service was available?
You mean how much the development charge is to hook up, or?
I would guess that's the right,
Okay.
I don't know how even how to
So
phrase it.
typically, when you have a new house put in, there is what's called a systems development charge, and that a portion of that goes to the water. The ones that we have in place until Saturday, we're actually in the midst of changing them. So May 1st, the new charges go into effect. The ones that we have in effect right now is just water and wastewater, and it's about $1,800 for a single family home for both water and wastewater. Those are going up because that is incredible. Well, it's also been that way for a very long time, and that ours are pretty much the lowest in the area in the state probably, and so those are going up. And to be honest, I'm hazy on the exact amount, but they're going up significantly.
Oh.
Now with this particular situation, however, in the great thing about these improvements is that because there's an LID bringing water service, then there is no system development charge on water as part of this project, and so that's a benefit, is that you're not going to have to pay that hookup if you decide to use the water service. So this project, if it goes through, you'll have water available in front of your house, and there'll probably be a cost for the meter install, and then you'll have to pay a plumber to get from your house to the line. But there's not any other charge to hook you up.
And I was curious, I mean, our water and septic is adequate. I was thinking down the road, if for some reason you did decide to throw something on the roof, on that corner of the property, try to offset the rest of it.
Right. Well, and at least you have options, right?
Yeah.
And the great thing about having your own well is you can use that, even if you do hook up to city water, you can use your well for non-potable stuff. And so you don't have to put your drinking water all over your lawn, right? So you do have some options there.
Yeah, when we lived in out next to Eugene, we paid a price. They just squared it off, whether you were using it for your yard or the toilet. And I'm going, well, dang, you want to water your yard, but
Yeah.
that just starts costing more than green grass at work.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you look into the cost of providing drinking water, the standards for drinking water are so much higher. There is a huge cost associated with that, and so you hate to use that on plants that don't
Right.
care whether there's
Right.
a little germ in there or not. Yeah. Mr. Hethman, do you have any questions that haven't been answered?
Since our last meeting just a few weeks ago, have the numbers changed? I know at the time,
Okay.
I think you said it was 10-7 for my side.
Yeah. So let's see. They do change, and so what we're looking at right now for your property is an overall cost of the total of cost of 10.5, but then there would be the city portion would be about 3,000. So you'd be looking at $7,583.91 according to this current calculation.
Right. And what's the monthly on that?
That would be about $44 a month.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I got a nice street outside. I got, sewer drain right outside the house. I understand the improvement to the city and to the neighborhood itself. I'm a good old boy from Tennessee, been in Oregon about 12 years, and whenever an area there gets annexed, the city covers everything. at the time. Obviously, that didn't occur here, and this is the way Oregon does it. So, you know, if I have to live with it, I can. I'd be against the project simply because I'm a little cheapskate. I want to pay.
Mm.
But, you know, I understand the benefit, and it's okay. I would like to see the numbers go back out to the neighborhood and ask them again if they want the project or not.
Mhm.
That's just a preference of mine.
Yeah.
But
And this is still needs to go before the city council again. So there will be a public hearing before the council, and I'm thinking what we'll probably do is we'll probably need to send out certified mail again with the current spreadsheet at that time because you know a lot of people didn't show up to this, and there weren't numbers sent out with the letter that we used to invite people to this because we were still working on it, and the intent also was to adjust these numbers through this process. But yeah, we'll do some notifications again before we get to that public hearing. Just so you know, I don't know if you're on a computer or on a phone or some device where you can download, but in the chat function here on Teams, I did put the maps and the spreadsheet so that you can download it for your own perusal if you want.
yeah, I'm not seeing those in the chat.
Wonder why. Do I have to hit something?
And just for the record, we do tend to agree with him. We don't really want to
Oh.
do it, but
There they are.
that's better than it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, improvements have to happen, inevitably.
Right. And we try to make it as palatable as we can. So hopefully the city council agrees also with the city contribution.
It'd be nice if we could even find some more funding. That would be great.
Yeah.
We'll keep looking.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to find funding for this type. Most of the funding out there is in the form of loans
Yeah.
for things like this. And
Yeah.
so, but we will keep
a little
digging
bit.
and see what we can
That
find.
would
Yeah.
be great.
All right. Any other questions or concerns that we haven't addressed already?
We're good.
Okay. Mr. Yeah.
Brandon, if you're still listening.
I am.
All right. So for you guys, Brandon's our finance director. He lives out of town, so he drove home and now he's listening in. Would this have to be a bond? And I just asked because could there be a lower rate if we went through, because this isn't this is a loan amount you could get from Business Oregon or USDA. And would we get a better rate if we went that way?
The better rate is questionable. Potentially, yes. So I guess to answer your first question, no, this does not have to be a bond. We have lots of options as far as the funding source is concerned. A bond certainly gives us a lot more stability because it's understood that it's backed by the payments from property owners in the area. But that doesn't mean we have to go that route. Certainly, if the city was able to do it internally, that's an option. If we're able to get some kind of assistance from Business Oregon or OHA because there's water involved, those are all things that we can pursue and may likely come with a lower rate, yes.
Because what's the rate we're getting on our wastewater treatment plant?
At the time we were told
Like 1.87 or something like that?
I thought it was 1.6.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, the last from our federal partners. That was pre-COVID. And so certainly I think that rate has likely come down further.
Right.
Debt that the city just refinanced came in at 1.38%. And that was on the open bond market. So likely federal partners are going to be at or below that rate.
Could be quite low though.
Yeah. So that 3.5% for the bond rate could be half that rate, which could, particularly over time, make a significant difference.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brandon.
Of course.
All right. Any other questions, Ray?
Thanks for your guys' work on this.
Um,
And thanks for coming to talk to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Would like to put our concerns out there. And
sure, and we want to hear
we
them.
can all work things out because
Yeah.
we know that there are some people that do need it and it's a hard situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we really appreciate the civility and kind of getting together and talking about why things are the way they are and so forth, because we do, as humans, we get riled up at first when something new comes across, and
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
it's good to talk these things out and help people understand. And yeah, I think that's all I've got. Just the final caveat that this is still a moving target, and we'll see where it ends up. But the next stage will be getting a public hearing scheduled in front of the city council, and like I said, we'll get some mail out to each of the properties with the projected costs on there. So thank you very much.
This is a lot more palatable than the first one.
Right? That was not on purpose, I promise you.
We're like, oh my gosh. Really into it.
I'm starting to look at Montana already.
Yeah. All right.
And we really like Sweet Home, so we
Well,
don't want to leave.
well,
right?
lately Montana's gotten a lot more expensive
Yeah,
too.
I still have relatives there, they told me.
Yeah.
California's moved.
Right. They tend to do that to places, don't they?
Yeah.
Yes,
Drive up costs.
well,
Yeah.
we like this little fun stuff.
Well, thanks. We like it too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and end the meeting then. Thanks
Thank you.
for your. Have a good night.
Have a good night.